So before I push too far forward into the next segment of the walk cycle, I just want to remind you a couple of things and plant just a couple of seeds. The first thing is I want to save what I'm working on. So I have my walk04 cycle, and I can tell it's not saved. I got a little asterisk next to my title in the title bar, and if I hit Command Save, the asterisk goes away. So I know that I've saved what I'm working on. Now I always like to do a file save incremental along the way. I've bumped up my walk cycle to version 5, and in the event that I want to go back and I want to pull all of the animation out of my sequence, I just want to remind you that if you go to Window, Timeline, right now I'm looking at the Timeline window, and I have this object called Walker, and this hierarchy corresponds to this hierarchy. So if I click on Walker, I'm going to see all of the objects which have an animation on it. Okay, so right now the walker itself, remember, is bouncing up and down. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. So the walker itself has a bounce up or down. The upper body is rotating back and forth, and I could dig down and look at you know, the F curves and look at all the things that are being animated. But right now I can keep track of everything that has some kind of animation associated with it. Now let's say if I hit the play button here, right now my little walker's doing its thing, and let's say for some reason that I wanted to get rid of, just maybe the leg rotations. What I could do is I could go into the left leg, and I could select, by selecting on that object, I've actually just highlighted all the keyframes associated with that, and just for kicks I'll hit delete. Now when I hit play, I'm going to have one leg that's stuck in place. So I got somebody who's, you know, looks like he's dragging a leg there. Let me undo that, and I get my animation back. There's a number of things that I can do to get rid of all of the animation. I can go through individually and just select the objects that have keyframes associated with those and just hit the delete key. Alternatively, if I select the walker and I hit delete, I've just deleted everything, every animated keyframe that's on the walker. Now, another thing that you'll notice is that depending on where I have my playhead at the time that I hit delete, if I'm sort of right in the middle of a stride and I hit the delete key, that is the position that my walker adopts. So if I scrub my playhead back to the beginning with the walker selected, I hit the delete key, now I have no animation on the object at all. It's kind of back to that first pose, that starting pose, and all of the keyframes have been removed. So when you start your second animation, you know, it might be useful to start over as a clean slate. You'll keep the model with all the rigging, or maybe you want to start with the existing animation in place and then just tweak the existing animation that you already have. That's going to be up to you to determine that. I also want to remind you to render this, there's a couple of different ways to render it. The easiest way to render is just to click on this middle render button and choose to make preview. At this point you'd want to dig into, you don't need to dig into the options, I just wanted to check to see what my codec was set to, but you do want to modify the image size. So for those of you using the demo, I think you're limited to 640 on the high end, so I'll key in 640, and that just made a 640 by 480. Want to make sure that I'm doing a full render, all frames, and I'll say OK. And at that point, it'll run through, it'll calculate my render, and when it's done, it'll open up in the picture viewer. And at that point, I could do, I could save this to any location that I want, or I could just preview it and take a look. Okay, so I'm getting my preview here. I'm looking at this at less than 100%, and so I'll probably want to bump that up just to make sure that I see this at a 1-to-1 ratio to evaluate. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Again, I still want to take into account the environment, maybe, you know, apply some textures or change the lighting a little bit, but in terms of the animation, I'm pretty satisfied with that, even though I probably want to go back and change the head bobbing up and down. It's a little much for me. I could save as, and again, at this point, I don't want to do a still image. I want to do the animation. The format that I want is going to be a QuickTime movie, and I just want to run through here and make sure that I have everything that I need. Everything else looks pretty good. I'll say OK, and then I get prompted for a destination. I'm going to save it inside my walk folder. Now, at this point, I'll probably make a new folder, and I'll call this renders. And all of my renders are going to end up in the render folder. That way, I don't populate my project folder with you know, a whole bunch of renders, still, or animation. I'll just call this walk01, and I'll save that. And sometimes it's helpful to include what the resolution is, but for now, I'll just let that default. So that's the quick way to get it out with the preview method. Alternatively, and the most appropriate way to do this is to set the render settings. And so if I click on the render settings icon, general I can let default. Output I'll want to make some decisions based on resolution here. So I'm going to select this preset. I like to go to film and video, and pretty much any of these NTSC widescreens will do. I like to do this HD TV 720. It's a 720p image, so when I select that, now you see that I get a width of 1280 and a height of 720. Now, I will pay the price for render times. This is a really simple animation. There's, you know, effectively there's no materials, and there's a really simple light in the scene. It's 30 frames. It'll still take a minute or two to render. But everything else, I believe, looks pretty good. So I'm going to go to the Save tab now, and I'm gonna give this a file name and a destination. So I'll click on the ellipse here. I'm defaulting to my renders folder. So remember, I'm inside my walk project. I'm inside my class folder, inside my walk project, inside renders. And I'll call this walk01, or I'll call this walk720, so I know what the resolution is, _01 for the version. So I'll save that destination. The format that I'm going to render out to is a QuickTime video. I think everything else looks okay. If I want to, I can jump into the options. I'm going to go back to the output just to make sure that, yeah, I missed something. The frame range was set to current frame, so that means that I would only render just the frame that I'm looking at. I want to make sure I'm rendering all frames. Okay, so again, under the output tab, I set the resolution, and I want to make sure that the frame range is set to all frames. I'll go to the Save tab, make sure that I have a destination and a file name established. My format is QuickTime, and now I can close that window. Now, those render settings that I just established, those render settings are embedded in the project, and so I can save this project, file save, and now I've saved those render setting options, so that if I close this file and I open it back up, it's going to remember what its format is, what its resolution, its frame range, and its destination is. Okay, so I definitely want to make sure I save that. Once I establish those render settings, I can click and hold on this center render button and choose to render to picture viewer, or if I just click one time on that button, it'll kick that render over based on the render options that we've established. Now, once this renders, we don't have to do a file save as, because we've already established the file name and already the destination, so this is building the file in the destination that we've described. So you can see this is a really simple animation, and it's taken quite some time to render because of the high resolution. So imagine when we start building really complex animations with lots of effects at a high resolution, we're going to have some time twiddling our thumbs. So let me just take a look inside my walk project, into renders. Here's my high res, my walk 720. Okay, now it's playing, and I got, you know, I can't really tell if I like the animation or not, mainly because there's not an entire loop. It's kind of stuck just in that 30 frames, so it's 1 second of animation, not too interesting. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to extend the timeline, take the existing animation that we already have, and loop that animation so that we can just keep a continuous walk cycle within Cinema 4D based on however many frames we decide we want to use. And we'll do that in the next presentation.